for joining today's learning session, advocating for your child's health in the school environment. We're ready, so let's go ahead and jump in. Two things we wanted to share first about housekeeping and logistics. Those interested in receiving interpretation, please follow the directions for live interpretation on this slide. You will have the ability to click through the audio channel for Spanish or English settings, and you'll find a little world looking sign. And para las personas interesadas, tenemos interpretación en este taller. Debajo de la pantalla de Zoom hay un icono en la forma del mundo. Presiona el botón para activar la interpretación. El icono tendrá la habilidad de usar el canal de audio que prefieren en inglés o en español. El audio principal será en inglés y profesor Armendáriz estará interpretando el taller en el canal en español. Gracias, profesor. This workshop is being recorded, and we will provide a link to the recording with a copy of the PowerPoint and 2 handouts a few days after this session will take place. Please use the call-in option if you have any issues with your computer audio. Everyone is muted, and place any questions that you have in the question box. And if you'd like to share where you're from or your experiences, please put that in the chat box. And lastly, enjoy. We are really excited about our presenters today. I'm Kristen Ortega, the District Wellness Project Coordinator serving our Paso Norte borderland region. Michelle Smith is our co-host today, and she's the Texas State Coordinator for Action for Healthy Kids and has worked with schools and families on wellness for almost 20 years. Nomita Bajwa is the past parent SHAC chair for Fort Bend ISD and current parent representative on Texas SHAC. She recently started a professional developed consultant company around school health called Wellness Geeks Consultants. She is on her second year of her Doctor of Education program of the University of Houston. And most importantly, she's a proud mom to 2 wonderful daughters and a wife of a surgeon who recently retired from the Army Reserves. Welcome. And our next guest speaker is Christina Fenstermacher. She is a stay-at-home mom who turned student working on becoming a certified teacher. She is a current substitute teacher at El Paso Independent School District and is the past PTA parent president of Whitaker Elementary and is active in the Trans Mountain Early College High School at PTSA. She's also been instrumental in helping establish a wonderful project at Whitaker Elementary. So thank you all for joining us today. A bit of information about our organization. Action for Healthy Kids has been engaged in work with school districts around nutrition and physical activity since 2002, when David Satcher, in his role as the Surgeon General, declared we had an obesity epidemic. Teams across the US gathered in Washington to strategize on how we could improve the impact through schools on our children's health. Since that time, we've expanded our vision not only to focus on nutrition and physical activity, but also encompass the whole child model with a goal of having children active, healthy, and ready to learn. The challenge has changed over time. We originally focused on nutrition and physical activities in schools, but over time we faced even more challenges to keeping our kids active. More screen time, no safe places to play, less walking and biking to school, all of these things are making our children even more sedentary than ever before. According to the US Department of Health and Human Services, obesity rates have tripled over the past 40 years for children and teens. Studies show that 1/3 of children and teens in America are either overweight or at risk of becoming overweight. Overweight Adolescents have 70% chance of becoming overweight or obese as adults. And not only are children sitting in front of the screen instead of playing outside and exercising, they're also exposed to constant advertising messages about unhealthy food. Fast food restaurants, sugary cereals, sodas, and energy drinks all over television. So here's a quiz. What do you think the answer is? How many food ads do you think an average child watches on TV? The answer is there's an estimated 40,000 ads per year that young people see. Half are for food, especially for sugary cereals and high-calorie snacks. Of the healthy foods that are advertised, less than 3% are those of healthy foods. And while the lack of activity is a problem, so is our children eating. This affects how they succeed in school. If a child is hungry, they can't learn. And many times children go to the nurse with a tummy ache, and it's actually because they didn't have breakfast and they're hungry. And kids need healthy food to succeed and thrive. And that's really the type of support we provide. Our schools play a key role in how healthy kids are eating and how much physical activity they get. Daily physical education, once a routine in schools, are now offered by less than 10% of public schools. Not only are they losing a key place to get physical activity, but they are not getting the education they need about the importance of eating right and being active, key components of physical education classes. Physical activity in adolescents has consistently been related to higher levels of self-esteem and lower levels of anxiety. Both of these are associated with better academic performance, particularly right now when kids have been learning remotely and have less social contact as well as less physical activity opportunities. So it's important for us to find ways for them to stay active. We also wanted to show you this chart demonstrates the impact of exercise on the brain. The color blue is no activation in the region of the brain, literal no activation in that particular region of the brain. The multiple colors show positive neuroactivation in the region of the brain. And in this particular research study, 20 children completed the same cognitive test identifying the direction of letters on a computer screen. And 10 children did 20 minutes of walking, before they took the test, and then while 10 sat for 20 minutes and then took the test. Those children who walked responded faster and had greater allocation of working memory and made fewer errors than those who sat for 20 minutes. We have another quiz. Here's another quiz question. How many footsteps do you think an average adult or child takes in a day? The answer is the average American walks 3,000 to 4,000 steps a day, which is roughly 1.5 or 2 miles. But the recommended number of steps is 10,000 or 3 to 4 miles. And it doesn't have to be all at once, of course. It could be in short chunks of 5 to 10 minutes. Just 30 minutes per day can increase cardiovascular fitness and strengthen bones and reduce body fat and boost muscle power and endurance. Also to note, it's recommended that children be active for at least 60 minutes per day. And since they are in school the majority of waking hours, we have to make sure that they have an active school, that they stay active during the school day. So with all this, what can you do? First, don't be intimidated by 10,000 steps or an hour of physical activity per day. Working towards its goals is the first step. And being an advocate for school wellness is a great way to help make sure that your children get as much needed physical activity and good nutritious school meals. All institutions, including schools, families, communities, have played a role in creating the health crisis that affects our children, and all must play a role to solve it. Parents and caregivers are particularly important in making sure children have the best chance of being active at school as well as at home. They can have the greatest impact on changing school practices because they are the strongest advocates for our children, and your involvement can really just move mountains. We believe that, and we know that. So this is a great point in time where we get to hear from parents who have become school wellness advocates at the campus and district level. One of our very own from here in El Paso, Ms. Christina Fenstermacher, will share her experience in creating a culture of health at Whitaker Elementary. And Ms. Nomita Bajwa from Fort Bend ISD will share her experiences in participating at the district level. So welcome, welcome, welcome. And we have, I'm going to go ahead and stop share. And it looks like we might have a question. And so Christina and Nomita, thank you for joining us. We wanted to kind of just jump into the first questions, if that's all right with you. Perfect. And so our first question we wanted to ask is, how did you first get involved at the district or campus level?
Okay, I'll go first. Thank you so much for inviting me. That was a really great overview because I really do believe that parents are the best advocate. I really didn't understand how much parents could do. I've been in school health on the school health advisory committee or council for almost a decade. My kids are a little spaced apart. I got into it at both levels. I was working on the campus level with PTO, and I was working as a community representative doing some health events. And a parent that was on the council pulled me inside, said, you know, you like this health stuff and you really want to make things better for the kids. Why don't you come and join me on this council? And I had never heard of it before. But as you can see, once I got on, I met a whole bunch of people who kind of thought like me. And it was a really great experience. I've been on ever since, and now I'm at the state level as a parent representative, and it's a really great experience.
I had a similar experience, and thank you so much for the opportunity to share it. But my pathway into parent engagement was through the PTA on our local campus. And I have two children, 5 years apart. So my oldest was blessed. My first school experience was with a wonderful principal who really encouraged parent engagement on the campus. And then my daughter was 5 years behind and went to a different school where we encountered a principal who did not allow parents on campus. And so not only was there a lack of healthy programming, there was just a lack of opportunities for parents to engage in any way, shape, or form in the education of their children, which was obviously very unhealthy. So through my connections that I had established with the PTA and the PTA council in our area, I was able to get some other parents engaged in advocating at that school for a change in administration, which the district did make, and then we just went from there.
That's great to hear. So it seems like there was some activation that happened from some other parents that, or ways that you both wanted to make change. So that's great to hear. And so I don't know if you can provide maybe just one great example of what was a particular priority, or how did your group determine your project or priority to focus on? Can you expand on that?
So that's a really great question, because I think I think we all know we can be advocates, but we really don't know what does that mean in process. One of the things I was, after about 7 years of being on the School Health Advisory Council, which had been working on recess and trying to make sure kids had unstructured play and things like that, we kind of hit a place where we could revamp the whole wellness policy. And so we had an opportunity to visit different campuses and ask parents and teachers what was their biggest concern about school health. And I think Christina brought up a lot of concerns, like each campus is so different, right? And each principal is so different. So every campus is very different, but we came across one campus and a parent came up to me and said, I don't know why you're working on policy. I'm really concerned about all this food wastage that's happening during lunch. And it really threw me, because I was like, what food wastage are you talking about? And, you know, that's not an area of passion for me, just because I didn't pay attention to it, right? I was more on the activity side. And then it came up again at a different campus, and I thought, this is completely not related to policy, but obviously it must be important, because a parent is making an effort to come to me and talk to me about it. And so that's kind of how a lot of things come up, is when a parent is really concerned about the way a school is going, that they'll come and talk to another parent. And I just happened to be the chair that year and thought, let's see where this is going to go. And so this is why it's so important, even if you're not on a school health advisory council, to make your voice heard, because no one will know. You think people know what's going on, but they really don't until you say it in words and put it in writing and send it up. I think that's really important.
And I'll pick up Nomita. You would think we rehearsed this or something, but
Yeah.
she made a comment that I think was very important in how we decided what to prioritize on our campus. Once we got a new administrator who had been directed to be more open to parent engagement, we set about surveying our community, first of teachers and then of parents. And because the parents had been prohibited from participating in the school for so many years, the teachers had been voluntold to do everything. And they were tired, they were worn out, they didn't want to do it anymore. So we just went to the teachers with one question, which was, if you could see something happen on this campus, a passion project, what would it be? What would you want us to do as parents? And we let them inform us. We didn't come to them and say, okay, here's our plan. This is what we see is wrong. This is what needs to happen here. You know, we didn't come in forcefully. We came in with how can we support you? And I think that they appreciated that. And what a number of teachers told us was that for many years, the school had had a garden in the back, and the garden had gone untouched for about a decade. It was in complete disrepair. They had a greenhouse that was falling down, and they said, we would really like to see that revitalized. So in my case, it wasn't even that my first passion was the health issues. It's just that that's what came from the teachers. And then from there, we said, well, we'll see what we can do about that. And again, all we did as parents was provide space for people to come in. We hosted an open house in the garden setting. And we said, look, here it is. The teachers would like us to revive this. They'd like to use it as an outdoor classroom. We'd love to give fresh sample tastings so kids and families can learn to eat healthier. What do you guys think we can do? Again, we didn't have a plan. We didn't tell people what to do or what we needed. And it was just through that one meeting that we found out, wow, well, we have a grandfather in our community who's a retired irrigator, worked for the city doing irrigation. So he said, well, I can put in the irrigation system. And we had another dad who said, well, I'm a contractor and we can surely bring in the heavy equipment to take out all these old planting beds. And we had another member who said, well, my church would be willing to partner with us to donate the wood to build new planting beds. So it was just providing the space for people to grow into, no pun intended, so that they could contribute in a way that was meaningful to them. Because if we had rolled out and said, all right, dads, we're having a t-shirt sale, we need you here on Friday from 3 to 4 to sell t-shirts, not happening.
Thank you so much. And is there any point where you where you had to convince or communicate or, you know, in terms of, I think you kind of mentioned that, Christina, to be honest, it seems that like I think a lot of the questions kind of answer themselves, but is there anything that you all want to expand on related to like how supportive the school or school district, leadership were on revamping a school wellness policy, for example, or was there anything in terms of support around the different projects that you did, Christina, and how did you coordinate with them? Can you also share that?
So for the food wastage project, that did necessitate, because it was at a district level, there were more than one schools, and we have 80 schools in our district. And it was a big project because when I tried to find out a little bit more about it before I brought it to the School Health Advisory Council, just because I only had that one person. And I found out it was a known issue with the nutrition department. And the problem was our district was so big that we covered too many jurisdictions that had different legal definitions of what you could share. And so that did necessitate me having to work a little bit with admin at the district level, because it's not an education, it's not a true education thing, but it is a service thing. Like they could have donated that food, and it was food that was very, it's pre-pandemic, I know, and we don't share like that anymore, but there are a lot of hungry kids who go home on the weekends, and it's hard for them to see that food getting tossed, right? And it's hard for parents to see it. So we did have to talk to quite a few people to try and figure out principals, nutrition, the teachers, parents. I think Christina mentioned if we went in and told all the parents, hey, you know what, you're going to have to figure out how to get this food and donate it to someplace, and we're going to start this new program district-wide, that would not have worked at all. But what we could do is give them the information they needed as to why this was happening. And each of the campuses kind of figured out what they wanted to do with the resources they had. And one of the PTOs decided to create share tables. And so the nutrition department saw that. And because they were talking to each other, the nutrition department became a place where if schools were interested in dealing with this problem, they could go and get that information now. And so we didn't have to mandate anything with a policy change with that particular thing, but it did improve that trust that the schools felt that the district level was listening and actually trying to solve some of these problems. And what was the other part of that? I think the support, it was variable, and we really had to push that issue a little bit at the district level. But the campus level, they just wanted to make sure they weren't going to do any extra work, and that's why we decided to create the opportunity. If they were interested, there were the rules and regulations that they had to follow. And if they weren't interested, no big deal. There was no penalty for that. So that helped, create some trust in that issue for later on down the line.
Right.
In our case, we didn't have to do a lot of convincing with the garden project because it was, it was created bottom up. It wasn't an idea we solely wanted to get. It was something that the community already had buy-in. And because of the networking, the open house that we held, we found out that we had so many resources within our school community, and we were able to capitalize on those. So we were not coming to the table empty-handed when we went to the principal or the district and said, oh, we want to make a garden, so can you get us all the supplies? We need some lumber. Oh, and can you pay the water bill? And we came to the table with, here's a list of everything that we have put together that we can provide. And all we need from you is a green light. And they were thrilled. And this is where our partnership with Action for Healthy Kids began, because it was our very first $1,000 grant that we applied to get the $1,000 to start the garden, to redo the garden. And when you are able to come to the table with money, then you're seen as an asset to the school. Parents unfortunately get a bad attitude, a bad reputation for complaining and only showing up when there's problems. But when you as a parent group can come to the table and say, we have $1,000, oh, and we also have an irrigator, and we also have a contractor, and we also have, 6 teachers who are willing to help us with this project, then you've already done the work that the admin usually has to do, the team building. You've already done that. So it didn't take a lot of convincing on our part, but I would really stress that the key is, you've got to find what your school community needs. Because if you try to come in with your own ideas and your own program, but it's not something people are interested in, it's not going to work. I did see a question in the chat that I wanted to address about the campus is getting more and more closed off to parents, which is very true right now, which is why we're in a holding pattern. But also parents need to understand that we cannot be kept out of the schools. That may be policy, but policy is made by the people we elect. And that's where advocacy becomes critically important. As a parent, if you don't know who your school board trustee is, you should know. Their office should be familiar with you. You should be in regular communication with them, not just to complain, but also to commend good things that are happening. Because when a principal tries to tell you, we're not allowing parents, that's when you have the opportunity to challenge that. But you've got to have that relationship with your elected officials. And so many parent groups and parents don't. They don't vote. They don't understand the connection between voting in the school board races and what happens in the classroom. So, that's also where we have to advocate that we maintain those partnerships and relationships and access.
Right. And so I guess, was there any place where you all set out to do something, but then, versus what you were able to accomplish? And I think you also mentioned it. I think I'm kind of coupling some of these things together, but what would you recommend to others and how they can get involved? And I think there's, I'm kind of monitoring the chat. There's some, I guess if there's any particular ideas with now that we're from, with the pandemic and everything. And so any other particular thoughts or ideas?
I think Christina really covered a lot of really great ideas, because it really comes down to, this is your school. If you are a parent and your child's going to school, like she said, if you look at that whole school model that you were talking about earlier, that model has kids at the center, but who's right around those kids? It's the parents. The parents are the conduit between that child and that school. And without your voice, they're going to make decisions, without you. And you'd rather it be with you, because sometimes they'll make decisions kind of in a bubble of what's good for the school, right? They're not always thinking about how does this translate down to where your child is. And if you need to, I think I saw a question about going into school after the shooting and after COVID being more closed off. I can only imagine how difficult that is. I think I have not been able to go to school as well, but what we can do is, you can maintain contact with your principal. And if it becomes an issue, I really believe that sometimes they just don't really know what parents want. They're just going off of the one parent that maybe complained that I don't feel like my child is safe if any other adult is in the school. And that person really didn't take time to think about what that meant. And if you come together as a community, if you are in a PTO or if you're in a group of some kind, booster, any group that's at a school level, get together with those other parents and ask to talk with the principal and raise those concerns, because it's valid. I think anything that, if you feel it, it's valid, and you need to have a way to express yourself about how your child is doing. And if we don't, the same thing will happen, right? If we don't say anything, it's just going to continue to be the same thing. So I think the one thing I do want to talk about is, sometimes when you work on projects, kind of what you were talking about, the garden, Christina, and then this food thing that we did, one of the things it really does is it develops those relationships over time. So you will have access into these schools better than you would if you just came at it the one time with a complaint. I think Christina mentioned that it's good to commend as well, and it's good to know your trustee, but being involved in these school projects helps you develop those relationships so that in these times, you can go back to the school and say, hey, remember me? I'm that mom that did XYZ. I have a concern. It really does help. So that would be my 2 cents on that.
Right.
And once again, a perfect segue for me because we did, you'd asked the question, was there something that you ran up against that maybe you couldn't do? Or once we successfully restarted our garden and we started a gardening program. And again, we had no teachers who wanted to teach it because they were all burnt out. So we, as parents, we taught that gardening club program ourselves. We had to cut off enrollment at 50 students because we couldn't manage it in our first year. In our second year, it was 75. And our last year, we couldn't do it because of COVID. But once we established that, we were adjacent to a custodial house that sits on our school property. It was an old custodian's house. And the house for custodians used to live there once upon a time, but they haven't lived there in like 25 years. And so those houses became places where all the storage was stored, all the furniture stored, where everything the school doesn't want is inside that house. So we had the idea of turning that house into a place where students could go for, where we could do our programming out of, our garden club programming, where we could provide additional music programming, and that we could use it as a positive behavioral support. We're putting a music room in there. We're putting a craft room. We're putting a Lego room. It's a 3-bedroom house. We've got a piano and musical instruments, and have brought in different members of the community who are interested in teaching those classes. So as you might imagine, that threw up all kinds of red flags for the school and the district. The secretary didn't want to lose her storage space. She had all her confidential school records stored out there, and where could they possibly go? And the custodians didn't want to have to manage and inventory all that stuff and get it moved out. The school was nervous about letting outside community members in who aren't part of the school to teach classes and programming. The district was nervous about us using a facility that had been vacant for 25 years and what was going to be the cost to bring it up to code, and all kinds of red flags went up. But because we had established ourselves as a professional, responsible parent group with resources, we had grown our credibility. And we also were able to go back to Action for Healthy Kids and get another grant, a larger grant. And we were able to come back to the table again and say, look, now we have $5,000. We have $5,000 to do this. We will bring in the painters. We will bring in the cleaners. If you take care of all the code stuff, we'll take care of everything else. And because we had built that credibility, because we had been present in the school, because we had demonstrated that we were not only going to complain, but if nobody else wanted to teach, we would teach. If nobody else wanted to, water, we would water, whatever it was. And we had built our credibility over time. So we did get approval. And believe you me, the secretary was so mad at us because she had to empty out that was her house. Okay. That was her place. And she was there in high heels, taking stuff, because there was all kinds of stuff in there, and we're like, oh, we could use these pencils for our program, and we could really use this. No, that's ours. That's school property. So yeah, it was interesting. But ultimately, we got the support of the district. We got the support of the faculty. But like Nomita said, building that credibility and being there as a consistent presence, and one that's not going to be, oh God, here comes Mrs. Fenstermacher again. Then as a parent, you have so much power to make things happen. You really do. You just can't be that squeaky wheel. You have to prove yourself.
Thank you. Thank you both. Really, I just want to thank you both in terms of sharing those words of wisdom and those nuggets of knowledge, really to help, I think, to help jumpstart some of and activate, some of these parents. I know for sure it's, with COVID, a lot of the experience that I've been, attending maybe like some of the school health advisory council meetings, and they're online now. And so there might be opportunities for you as a parent to connect to your district or maybe to your school. There might be different ways to get active. I'm not sure if you all have any other ideas in terms of how to start building maybe relationships and being creative and building those relationships with your campus or district.
That's a really great question. I think we both have talked about a little bit on the campus level and the district level. For the district level, which I can speak to, the School Health Advisory Council, each ISD is supposed to have one. So no matter where you go to school, you should have a shack. You should be able to find it on the school website, and it should be open to everybody. Hopefully now they're having Zoom meetings and you should be able to access that, like Kristen said. That's a really great way. You don't have to join to just be at the meeting. Just go to the meeting, bring a friend. That's always great to talk about afterwards, like what were they talking about? I think one of the things that people get put off by shacks is sometimes there can be a lot of acronyms and a lot of abbreviations, a lot of words that we don't use on the campus level that they do use at the district level. Don't let that deter you. Ask questions. It's okay. I still am learning at this point after a decade of doing this. I still don't know everything, and you won't know everything, but you can bring your parent mindset with you. That's what is needed. Bring your parent mindset, bring your parent curiosity. What does that mean for my kid, right? What does that mean for my school? How does that affect us? Those are the questions that really need to be brought up at SHAC. The other thing I wanted to talk about was just, if you have a problem, I think Christina mentioned this before, you don't want to be the person who just says, I really don't understand why my kid is having this particular problem all the time. And that will be in that, and just keep repeating that. Make sure that when you come to SHAC, it's about the whole district. It's about all the kids, and what really your goal there is to be an advocate, but really think about and have that mindset of all the kids. Think about your child's friends, the other families that try and bring that up, because I think that will be a richer experience for you as well. And so I do recommend to anybody who is not on a school health advisory council, if you're at this meeting, you would be perfect to be on a school health advisory council.
And I also saw in the chat, Patty asked about access to the facilities. I'm not sure if you're here, Mrs. Ortega, in El Paso, but we actually went through this battle with the district a couple of years ago. Okay, so just about, might have been 3 or 4 years ago, the city council got very involved in opening up the school facilities for after school use, because we have a shortage of areas, parks and recreation, but here sit these school facilities right in the heart of neighborhoods and they're totally locked up. So they actually just revised that policy, and largely because parents pushed through the city council, they pushed through individual voices. The interesting part was, you would think that parents wanted the campuses opened up after school. I certainly did. But the biggest barrier to that occurring, the loudest voices, were some of our local PTAs. And I was shocked. I was like, wait a minute, aren't we all here on the same team advocating for wellness? But we actually had parents and parent organizations say, we don't want those playgrounds opened up because we paid for the awning. The PTA paid for the awning. The PTA paid for the playground equipment that's there. And letting those people from the neighborhood come in and use it will damage it. And that investment needs to be protected. So it was a very interesting, ugly battle between the haves and the have-nots. But ultimately, there is a joint use agreement now in place between the city and the schools. Unfortunately, during COVID, it's not being enforced, but most of our campuses here in El Paso, and again, because of advocacy and because of people raising their voices, that policy change was made. And most of those facilities are supposed to be open to the public until dusk. And you'll see a sign posted on the gates of campuses where that's in effect. I don't think it's in effect for every campus in the district, but it was quite a few. It was like more than 20 campuses where they implemented that.
Thank you so much. Wow. Thank you. I think that's, I'm glad that we were able also to, thanks for those of you who've been using the chat and asking those questions, because for sure, I think it helps the conversation for sure. So as I mentioned again, thanks once again, and for your participation and coming to join our parent workshop today.
It's
And
our pleasure.
Kristen, I would just add one more thing to those people.
Sure, go ahead.
I mean, Action for Healthy Kids has a partnership, at the state level, at the national PTA. And our district also has a very active PTA council. It's been less so during COVID, but we have a very active PTA council that the district really supports and provides office space and other resources. So if you're not involved and you want to know how should I start, SHAC, the Student Health Advisory Council or Committee, is a great place to start, and that's district run. But from the parent run perspective, hey, we didn't have a PTA, we didn't have parent engagement, I started one. So, you sitting there as a panelist, you can start a PTA. You can visit texaspta.org, txpta.org, and they'll help you get a chapter started. And they provide wonderful training on parent engagement and parent advocacy. There's all kinds of resources that PTA has to offer. So I would encourage you, if you're looking for a way to build something on your campus, something sustainable,
Right.
You can start it. You don't need anything else. You don't need the principal's permission. You can do it. You can start it tomorrow.
I think that's so important, Christina. And I think, reaching out to somebody like Kristen, and, it's not just like it's the websites, but it's also, if you want to do a project and you're not sure where to start, reaching out to your representatives, they can connect you to someone who's already done a project like this garden project, right? And you can talk it through and say, well, what do I need to kind of watch out for? What are the challenges that you had that I need to maybe know now before I start, right? So I think that's another thing, is don't be afraid to reach out and ask for help. And we did that when we were doing our wellness policy. I actually reached out to Michelle and I went, I have no idea what a policy is. How am I supposed to do this? And she's like, don't worry, I will help you. Here are some resources, call me, So I think, you're so right, Christina, just having that resource at the state and national level. There are so many people who just want to help you, because we know that you, being a parent, you don't have all the resources you need, but you definitely have a whole community behind you that will be showing up at your door. You just have to ask. So I think that's so important to remember. You're not alone, that we're all here with you.
Thank you both for that motivation at the end. I think that was great, right, Michelle?
It was. And Christina, would you repeat again how they can access PTA resources?
Yes, so if for Texas, you can visit txpta.org. And right on that website, it'll say, I want to start a PTA. You hit a button, you fill it out, and then they will contact you and hand walk you through that process.
Well, you guys kind of did my part too. So, so I'm probably going to skip around a little bit. Michelle Smith, state coordinator, and I want to talk a little bit about ways you can advocate for a healthy school environment. These are just some of the key information that you might need to know, and we will send this PowerPoint out along with the recording, so you'll have some references you can use. We've talked about campus level, we've talked about district level. At the campus level, the Campus Advisory Committee, I'm not sure what everyone calls them. It could be a site-based committee, they have different names, but that group is supposed to have parents represented on it. Some campuses or some districts may have half parents and half staff and school teachers and things, but that is one place to go to get more information. They look at all the different things that need to be improved on a campus. So that's one place you can go on the campus. Also campus wellness teams. And as Christine had mentioned, the PTAs and parent groups are a great way to find partners to work on specific topics. And then getting to know all of the people on the campus, principals, staffs, and teachers. They can all help advocate for different types of wellness issues. And then at the district level, we've talked about district school health advisory committees. Those are really a good place for you to go. This grant, we've worked on a grant project that Paso del Norte has helped us fund. And so they're sponsoring this webinar this evening. And one of the things that we focused on was getting parents more engaged in the school health advisory councils. And it has been exciting to see the parents step up, particularly during the pandemic, and participate on these councils and bring their questions out. And, so we do all recommend that you look at volunteering for that school health advisory council. And again, the PTA has a district level opportunities, and your district administration is the someplace that you really want to communicate with. Don't be afraid to talk to your leadership at the district. Don't be afraid to talk to your school board. Knowing a school board member and asking questions and having them advance topics for you can be very helpful. Next slide. So we're going to talk a little bit about what you can do at the campus and then what you can do at the district. We talked a little bit about the site-based committees. They are supposed to be looking at how coordinated school health is implemented. That is something that's required by the state for grades K through 8 and involves nutrition, physical activity. And CATCH is one of the programs that is used, I know, in some school districts in El Paso. And so the campus plan should share how they're implementing those programs. Also, they should be looking at how they're keeping their kids active, at least 50% of the time in PE. They can look at other things. They can look at how student medications are distributed, policies around food fundraisers. So these are just some of the topics that you could bring up to that site-based committee and offer suggestions or have them review what's going on your campus. Next slide. I think the best thing to do is to ask first if there is a campus wellness committee, and if there isn't, partner up with some other parents and get one started. Some of the ways that you can communicate with those parents and drop off and pick up if people are sitting out front waiting to get their kids. Of course, right now, that's not happening, but in a normal situation, you could have flyers printed up that talk about different issues, or ask questions, do a quick parent survey, having campus newsletters share ideas around health resources. One of the things when Nomita was talking about how, and well, both Christina and Nomita were talking about how their different parents had different skill sets. If you do a quick survey, and there's a free SurveyMonkey is a free resource that you can use, and ask parents, what are you interested in working on? And like they said, you may have a dad that's more than happy to help you build school gardens, but not interested in attending meetings. So meet your parents where they are and find out what they're interested in. And then it will be a lot easier to get projects accomplished. And then visit your principal and make sure you understand what's already in place. A lot of times there may be things going on and they're just not doing a very good job of communicating. There may be a recess policy, they just haven't shared with everybody what that policy is. Next slide. We can't say enough, I guess, that school health advisory councils are really important and a really good way to communicate with the district. And they are credible, they are engaged a lot, even the ones that haven't been meeting during the pandemic, those council members are respected and they've been included in reopening plans. So it really is important if you can get involved and then ask the questions to make sure that things are going the way they should with those advisory councils. These are just some of the questions you could ask, and I'm not going to read all those. You can check those out when we send the PowerPoint. Next slide. So some quick ideas for action. It doesn't have to be, you don't have to do everything at once. You don't have to try to accomplish everything at once. Take things, well, as they say, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. So I don't think I ever want to eat an elephant, but the concept there is there, you know, it's very large, but you don't have to do it all at once. So next slide. As we've mentioned, asking questions, getting other parents engaged. I've found out over years that people don't understand school meals that well. And if you ask your cafeteria manager some questions, you might be surprised at what you find out. Finding out if your district has a recess policy or other types of physical activities policies. One of the key things ways that the district works on policy is through their district wellness policy. Every school district that's part of the school meal program, that's school breakfast, school lunch, has to have a wellness policy, and those are supposed to be updated every 3 years. So that is one way that you can start building towards stronger policies with your district, is if you find out what's on there, and then we work with the districts and share with them. We evaluate their policies and help them understand where there may be weaknesses and where there are things that they could improve on. You can find a lot of resources in our library at actionforhealthykids.org. Next slide. Just some things that you can think about, ways that you can start small and do something. Assorted fruit and vegetable samples a couple of times a month in the cafeteria. Right now, one that's really good is getting the PTA or the parent group to provide actually the water filling stations on top of your water fountains. They can be replaced with water bottle filling stations. And you could have some type of contest where the students and the teachers can win water bottles. There's a lot of benefits to something like that. The teachers won't be bringing in sodas if they have a water bottle that they can refill from a water filling station. So think a little outside the box about what things you could do on your campus. Next slide. Another thing is to try to shift away from food as events or as fundraisers, and try to do things that are active. We have found that kids are more excited about doing something active and having a dance day or having extra recess than they are about getting some type of food to eat. So just keep that in mind when you're working on events and different options for rewarding your students. Next slide. Brain breaks are really important things that can help your kids refocus. As adults, we can't sit in a chair all day or for hours and not get up and move around, and the same is true of our kids. So lobbying for brain breaks, one of the ways you could do that is to get your PE teachers to have brain breaks during staff meetings. That way the teachers are learning something that they could share and try with their children, but they're also getting a little activity back into their meeting time. So you can make recommendations like this with your principal. Next slide. School gardens, I think we've talked, Christina talked about theirs, and they have done such a fabulous job with their school gardens. And if they're as good as Christina, they have actually donated food, I know, to their food pantry that's right by the school. Some schools I've worked with have actually had little farmers markets and sold their extra produce. Others have sent the produce home to the families. So gardens can be a fabulous way to get kids active, to teach them about good nutrition, to get them to try new foods. It's just, there's just so many positives about school gardens. Next slide. And I think we've talked a bit about recess. I think it's top of mind in the school districts in El Paso. I believe most of them have recess. They may not all have a policy around it, but making sure that the recess is actually happening is something that needs to be worked on. Finding ways to ensure that teachers are letting the kids be active for the amount of time that's designated. So that's something else that you might want to look at your campus. Next slide. And this is one area that we focused on during our project. Safe routes to school is very important. There have been some tragic incidents in El Paso around schools. So Kristen's really involved with the Safe Routes Project and the Complete Streets project. And we're hoping to get a grant where we can expand our strategy out and continue to work on that. We're working with the American Heart Association, the city, and a lot of other organizations to try to make it easier for kids to walk and bike to school. And Paso del Norte has done a great job of working on trails and are looking at how to make it easier for the trails to be accessed from schools and to help kids get home via the trails. Next slide. And Extra Healthy Kids has been trying to get a better handle on what is important to parents. When we started working with schools 20 years ago, nutrition and physical activity were our primary focus. Bullying was something that was being discussed in the past few years, but now it seems mental health and physical activity are the two top issues. And 92% of caregivers, that's families, say kids are facing more challenges now with their health and well-being than they did 10 years ago. So there's a lot of concern about health from parents, and we just need to make sure that schools and school administrators and school boards understand that kids can't succeed if they're not healthy. So we need to make sure that that is a focus and a primary focus for schools moving forward, especially during times of these pandemic. Next slide. Again, we have some great resources. Check out our website. There are some COVID-19 resources you might find helpful there. You'll see other webinars and different learning opportunities. And we do have grants. They're not open yet. We're hoping to have something up in April. Join our email list so that you get our monthly newsletter. We do one in Texas. It's Texas specific. And hopefully we have a lot of tip sheets and different information. Christine, do you want to mention the new tip sheets that we have? Are we going to share those out?
Yes, all of the participants or those who registered will be receiving two main resources about being a wellness advocate and school wellness policies 101. So they're really good, and those are provided in English and Spanish. So those are to come.
Yeah, okay. Next slide. It's time to turn this back to you. This is just a reminder that you can be the champion for healthy change in your school. Make sure that you share information you've learned here with others in your schools as you try to work towards advocating for wellness. Be sure and engage with school leadership and staff. And if you can, start a wellness project at your school. And of course, visit our Action for Healthy Kids website and join the Texas team. And then there's one more slide, and then I'll turn it over to you. If we have gotten your interest on shacks, we are doing 2 learning sessions next week around Schools Advisory Councils. The first one is the basics about shacks, and we have several of our school districts that are going to share their information, kind of like we did tonight with this webinar. And the second one is all about successful shacks and what's made them successful. And so if you're interested in learning more, sign up for the webinars. Even if you can't attend, again, we will be sending out the recording so you can watch it at a later date. So I'm going to turn it back to Christine.
And remember, Kristen, it's great. It's great. No problem. So find us on social media and follow our Facebook page, Instagram, and Twitter. We frequently post ideas as well as the different partnerships that we have at the national level. And there's different ways to spotlight some of the work that we're doing here in El Paso. So it's a great way to kind of get everyone motivated and share also the great things that are happening. Before we let you go, we want to take some time to thank our guest speakers today and the Paso Norte Health Foundation Healthy Eating Active Living Initiative for supporting our work in El Paso and Southern New Mexico region. Also, a special shout out to our family connector, Ms. Mendoza, who just joined our Action for Healthy Kids team in our El Paso area. She will be working with schools in creating more family and school partnerships. And thank you for joining today's webinar or today's learning session. And we hope that you have a great rest of your evening with your family. Thank you.
Appreciate you guys.
Bye, guys. It was nice to meet you.
Thanks,
And good,
Christina.
yeah.
It's good
You're
to see you.
okay. And Kristen, you have my contact info if you need to I'm here, whatever I can do.
Sounds good.
Okay.
Thank you
Thank
so much.
you.
Thanks, Nomita. Good luck
Thank
with your
you.
classes.
Thank you.
Gracias. Thank you, Mr. Almendares.